Hello, everybody, and welcome to our show. We have exciting news for all Grimwit with Dimwits listeners. We are introducing bonus material called Slim Grims to our library of episodes. Slim Grims will not replace our regular episodes, but will be additional content down the road. But today, we wanted this episode to shine all on its own. These mini episodes will be recorded individually, giving us the opportunity to share our very own interests. Ooh, that could be scary, but in the very best way. So without further ado, here is the premiere of our first Slim Grim episode. Take it away, Blondie.
Welcome to Grimwit with Dimwits, Slim Grim edition. I am Blondie, Dimwit extraordinaire. Yes, I use my hands, but somehow it's just not as fun without T rolling her eyes and scoffing and mocking at me. But, let's face it, that is the funniest part. This is a slimmed down episode where I'll be taking you through DNA, law enforcement, and at-home DNA kits such as Ancestry. I'll be telling you real stories of how DNA was used to catch killers or identify Jane and John Does. First, I looked up exactly what DNA stands for. A little sorry I did, to be honest. It only consists of 2 words, but one of them is 16 letters. This is where I need T, the pronunciation queen. She can take these big long names, big long cities, and pronounce them beautifully. Where me, I struggle with a word that has 5 letters. So here we go. DNA is known as deoxyribonucleic acid. Now, if there's one person that appreciates that I did that, I'm extremely happy. Is the use of DNA technology in regard to at-home kits and the extensive database that it produces revolutionary or an invasion of privacy? Law enforcement has DNA resources such as CODIS, which means Combined DNA Index System. CODIS is a local, state, and national database of DNA profiles from missing persons, convicted offenders, and unsolved crime scene evidence. But what if there's no DNA from a person in CODIS? This is where at-home DNA kits come into the picture. The 2 main aspects of using DNA for law enforcement would be to identify Jane or John Does, or finding out identities of people that have committed crimes where DNA has been left at the crime scene. Here are some examples of DNA playing a part in discovering the identity of suspects. During the 1990s, this man was terrorizing Washington, D.C. He committed at least 10 rapes from 1991 to 1998. He would gain access into a victim's home, cut the phone lines to use as a restraint, and viciously rape them. Over time, his pattern escalated, and the rapist got more violent, more aggressive, and started brutally assaulting his victims until he eventually murdered Christine Merzian. This man was named the Potomac River Rapist. With little to go on, the case went cold, letting the killer escape justice for decades, until one of the killer's own relatives did an at-home DNA test where the results were submitted to GED Match. Law enforcement requested help from Paraben Nanolabs, a DNA technology company which uploads evidence from crime scenes to GED Match in an attempt to identify perpetrators. Paraben linked the family member's DNA to that of genetic evidence left at the crime scene. On November 13, 2019, 60-year-old Giles Daniel Warwick was arrested and charged with the rapes and murder. On November 19, 2022, while awaiting trial, Warwick was found dead in his cell and believed to have taken his own life. Such a coward not to face what he did. One of the longest unsolved cases in Pennsylvania was that of Anna Jean Kane. On October 23, 1988, Anna was found alongside a road in Perry Township, brutally murdered. With no suspects or leads, the case goes nowhere. Strangely, though, in February 1990, an anonymous letter was sent to a local newspaper that outlined numerous details about the murder and was signed by a, quote, concerned citizen. Police believing the concerned citizen may have had something to do with Anna's murder, they kept the letter and the saliva-sealed envelope with the evidence. Decades had passed with nothing but dead ends. But because decades had passed, advancements in DNA genetic technology were made. Police were able to compare the saliva on the envelope with the DNA on Anna's clothing to obtain a match. In August 2022, the killer was identified as Scott Grimm. Insert the irony here. Grimm was 26 years old when he committed the murder, but passed away in 2018 due to natural causes, and unfortunately could not be brought to justice. Anna Jean Kane's murder remained unsolved for 35 years. Hopefully, at least Anna's family had some closure. May 1987 in Orange County, California. Police found Shannon Lloyd's body sexually assaulted and strangled to death in her apartment. Evidence was collected, but unfortunately there were no suspects. 2 years later, another woman in California met the same fate. Her name was Renee Cuevas. In 2003, when investigators put the DNA samples into CODIS, it was revealed that both crime scenes had a genealogical match, but it didn't lead to a suspect. In 2021, when genetic genealogy had become more of a source to find suspects, and the DNA evidence was compared using that system, it led back to Reuben Smith, who lived in that area at the time. It also showed that Smith had a criminal record in Las Vegas for sexual assault and murder. The DNA sample that was taken during the Las Vegas case was used to connect him to the murders of Shannon Lloyd and Renee Cuevas. Reuben Smith died in 1999 by suicide, another man that didn't face his day in court. In Centerville, Utah, on November 17, 2018, a 71-year-old woman was at her church, alone with the doors locked, practicing the piano when she was attacked from behind. A man broke a window to gain access into the church, leaving blood on the broken glass. He began to strangle her. This caused her to go in and out of consciousness several times. Because of this, she could not identify her attacker. Although injured, the woman did survive the attack. The blood was not in any criminal database, so detectives submitted it to GED Match, which was more successful. The sample came back matching the suspect's uncle, who informed detectives of a relative that lived in the area at the time of the attack. The suspect was a 17-year-old high school student. Police tracked him down, and working with the school, they obtained a carton of milk from the garbage that he had thrown away after his meal. It was a match to the DNA from the blood. The unusual part about this case is that Paraben Nanolabs used their technology to track down someone who had committed an assault rather than a violent crime. Personally, strangling someone, let alone an elderly woman, is pretty violent in my opinion. This is where things get interesting. GED Match and Family Tree DNA do allow law enforcement to access their databases directly. However, GED Match does not allow the database to be accessed by law enforcement unless it's with the case of murder, rape, or kidnapping. The CEO of GED Match, Curtis Rogers, broke his own rule about allowing this case to be analyzed and subsequently received backlash for it. This resulted in GED Match making their rules stricter for law enforcement of how and when they can access records. I don't know, being able to identify and find anyone who hurt someone else, I think that would be a priority. Can you imagine committing a crime and then suddenly Cousin Katie takes a DNA test for fun to see her ancestry and bam, there's a knock at the door? That would be just my luck, although I wouldn't commit a crime. The other wonderful part of DNA testing is not only to find criminals, but also to identify Jane and John Does, giving them and their families some peace. Driving along Highway 25 in Alabama on March 27, 1961, James White picked up a teenage boy that was hitchhiking. Engaging in small talk along the drive, the boy told James that his parents were divorcing and he was running away from home. All of a sudden, James lost control of the car, he hit a guardrail and careened into the Cahaba River. James made it safely out of the car, but the boy drowned. Since James had very little information on him, authorities were unable to identify him. Personally, I think that the first thing I would have done would be to ask his name, at least his first name. The boy became known as the Unknown Boy for 60 years. In 2016, the boy's remains were exhumed with the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The remains were sent to the University of North Texas Laboratory to be tested. On October 2021, and after 6 decades, the unknown boy was identified as Paul, they called him Danny, Armentrout. Authorities were able to find Danny's brother, who was 77 years old and living in Florida. They also located his cousin that had moved to Germany. It's March 14, 1968, in Huntington Beach, California. A group of boys were playing in a field when they see a woman's body. Authorities arrive to find the woman beaten, sexually assaulted, and her throat slit. There was no identification to be found, and she became a Jane Doe for sadly 52 years. At the time, there had been a sexual assault kit done, and everything from the crime scene was retained in evidence. In 2001, the kit was tested to create a DNA profile of the suspect. They also took blood from her clothing to create a DNA profile of the unidentified victim. The victim's profile was entered into CODIS, as well as adding her fingerprints to the state and national databases. No results were found. In 2019, authorities turned to GED Match in the hopes they would be able to find a connection for both the victim and the suspect. A match was found for the suspect. His name, Johnny Crisco. Crisco was a very aggressive individual. He had a long arrest record, including domestic violence, sexual assault, and child molestation. He died in 2015 of cancer. I don't want to speak bad about people, but with this guy. In a continued effort to find out who the victim was, detectives began working with Colleen Fitzpatrick, a leading genetic genealogist. She created a family tree using GED Match, and through the victim's siblings' DNA, they identified the victim as Anita Louise Pitot. Anita was originally from Maine and came to California to be a waitress in February 1968. For 52 years, her remains had been in an unmarked grave, and she now rests in her family's plot in Maine. Her brother and 2 sisters never stopped searching for her. In Phoenix, Arizona, close to 2 decades ago, a man was found dead, believed to have fallen from a tall building. There were few clues as to who this man was, other than his basic appearance. 40 to 60 years of age, gray hair, missing teeth, and blue eyes. Because of this, the case went cold. The nonprofit organization known as DNA Doe Project had a handful of summer interns that took on the case to find out who this Arizona man was. With genetic genealogy and DNA testing, the interns were able to create a family tree and trace that tree to Frank R. Beck, 57. Beck had experienced homelessness later in life and lived in Arizona since the 1990s. Cynthia Gabbard, a member of the team, said, quote, "Every match that we added to the tree helped come to the final result. I'm so honored to be part of this team that has given this man his identity back." End quote. The nonprofit has worked on other cases in Arizona, currently having 15 cases with local agencies. there are more than 50,000 sets of unidentified human remains in the U.S. Rhonda Kevorkian, investigative genetic genealogist with the DNA Doe Project, says, quote, "They just want to focus on the fact that no matter how the person may have died, they were all somebody. They were human beings that deserve to have their name back." End quote. Forensic DNA testing has been around for more than 50 years and has helped solve a crapload of cold cases. The at-home DNA kit hit the market in 2007. As of 2019, more than 26 million people have uploaded their DNA, with an estimation of over 100 million today. And yes, I am going to admit I'm one of those 100 million. Ancestry DNA and 23andMe forbid law enforcement from accessing their databases without a search warrant. It was reported recently that 23andMe was served with 11 requests from law enforcement for DNA data, but, quote, exercised any available legal measures to object to law enforcement requests, end quote. All of the requests were denied. GED Match was founded in 2010 by Curtis Rogers and John Olson as an at-home DNA test kit company. Worldwide, more than 400 cases have been solved using genetic genealogy, 120 attributed to GED Match. Subscribers do have the option to opt in as far as law enforcement goes. This is assuming the user fully understands the fine print and what they are agreeing to. Now, how many people read that terms and conditions, 1,000-page, tiny little print? I'm sure there are some. I'll be honest, I'm not one of them. Andrew Crawford, Senior Policy Counsel of Privacy Data Project at the U.S. Center of Democracy and Technology, talk about fine print, says, quote, "The burden falls overwhelmingly on each consumer to do the legwork. Most folks don't have the time and stamina to digest each privacy policy. As a result, people often decide to use the product or app without fully appreciating all the potential uses of the data." End quote. DNA is a very valuable tool in catching criminals or identifying people who otherwise wouldn't be identified. But who should have access to this data? Plus, there is always that margin of error, like there is in anything, especially technology and everything that goes with it, and basically just people being people. Privacy is a huge concern. Should law enforcement be able to access all our DNA information? If it was all public, how many others would try and sell or scam us? Example, what if insurance companies could access our health information on an Ancestry site? Like we don't already get thousands of spam risk or telemarketer calls daily. Should we add something else to the list? But on the flip side of that is if cold cases, murderers, criminals, or unidentified remains can be identified through the DNA databases, isn't that a good thing? What if you could identify a serial rapist through DNA that kept them from hurting someone else? What if a murderer who stopped killing but was still free was identified and punished? How would the victims' families feel? Or if remains of someone that has been missing for decades was identified, think of the closure for the family. Honestly, if you think about it, all our information and basically our lives is already out there. The irony of all of this is they will go back and forth without resolution and just slow down the process of identification and conviction rates, and possibly giving criminals something else in their arsenal of things they might not have to worry about. If it was an easy check-the-box option to opt in, I think I would. I would want to know if Uncle Joe was a criminal. What would you do? Thank you for hanging in there for this Slim Grim episode, and check back every Monday for a new episode with T and me. Take care, and don't forget to let your imaginations run wild. Bye!
We just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us. And if you'd like to send in your creepy little grim bits, we would love to hear your personal stories, interests, and suggestions. Please email them to grimwitwithdimwits@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at grimwitwithdimwits, Twitter at grimwitwithdimwits, and Facebook, Grimwit with Dimwits. Join us every Monday for new episodes and feel free to share us with your grim-loving friends.
We would really appreciate if you would take a minute to rate and review. 5-star ratings go a long way and would really help us out. Until then, we would love it if you'd come back next week to delve with us into the strange and unusual things we just can't wrap our skulls around.